All right, so today's video is just gonna be a quick hit video on pricing your photography services. I think this can be so tricky. I've been thinking about this a lot. I have some thoughts for you, so I'm gonna set up my camera here and then I'll continue. Hi friends, in today's video, I'm gonna talk to you about pricing your photography services. I know this is such a pain point for so many photography business owners. It pops up a lot in the PhotoBoss Facebook group, and I know it's something that my coaching students ask me about a lot. And I think a lot of overwhelm from pricing stems from the fact that there's a lot of variables that go into how you should price your business. And that leads to overwhelm, which leads us to either just pick a price arbitrarily out of the sky, or maybe go to our competitors' websites and then base our pricing off someone else. And I don't want you to do this for a couple reasons we're gonna get into in today's video. And to better set your pricing around you, your profitability, and better yet, your sustainability in business, I'm gonna give you some tips in today's video. The first one is to know your numbers. Now, you may have heard people say you need to know your numbers in business in order to have business growth. But specifically here, I mean two different things. Number one is that you need to know your numbers in terms of what your business costs to run. So the subscriptions that you have, what things like your website cost, and your recurring purchases in your business. So what does it cost to run your business every year? So you're probably familiar with that. But I also think on top of this, you need to know another number, and this is very specific to you. You need to know how much do you need your business to pay you in order to maintain your lifestyle goals. So not every single one of us is going to demand that our businesses pay us $10,000 a month or $2,000 a month. This is specific to you. You need to find out, even as a goal, of how much you need this business to be paying you in order for it to maintain your lifestyle. So you need your cost of doing business. So what does the business cost to run? And your lifestyle goal. So those are two numbers I want you to hold on to and get familiar with as we move on to the next step. So the next step is your capacity. The reason that we have to talk about capacity when it comes to pricing in photography services is because a service is time for money. So obviously we do have a finite amount of time. And because of that, we have to keep in the forefront of our minds what we're able to commit to in terms of a capacity. So let's say, for example, you're a wedding photographer and you've calculated your cost of doing business, you have calculated what you want to be paying yourself as a lifestyle goal, and you come up with a number of $2,000 for a wedding. Now, this number might work in terms of profitability, but when you calculate how many weddings you're going to have to do, that is the capacity number. And that's important to consider because as the capacity may be at its peak, you might have to outsource your editing, which I highly recommend and stand behind, but that increases your cost of doing business, right? So as you book more weddings, you also have to pay the second shooter. As you book more weddings, you also have to outsource your editing and get some help. So those are things you have to build into your pricing. So thinking about your capacity in terms of how many weddings can you do or how many portrait sessions can you do, but also the capacity of your season where you live. You could say, oh, I'd love to do 30 weddings a year. But if your season is only 6 months long, just keep in mind what that's actually going to look like on a weekend by weekend basis, because all those weddings are going to cluster. I'm seeing this calendar behind me and thinking it's going to cluster into those prime seasonal months. So you have to be thinking about that capacity and be realistic about the seasonal part of photography and where you live. So if you live in a highly tourist area or highly sought after area for tourists, that's something to consider. Is this year-round tourism or is this seasonal tourism? Because you may be able to shoot 30 weddings if it's across the year, but if you have 3 prime months of seasonal tourism, that might not be realistic for you to shoot 30 weddings within that season. So think about your capacity, think about the seasonality of the type of business that you run as well. One way around this for portrait photographers is to start renting out a studio or stretch their season in other ways by offering, seasonal mini sessions or things like that. So think creatively about how you can stretch out your capacity and stretch out your season. So next we're gonna think about simplifying and clarifying the presentation of your pricing. This is so important because if you confuse, you lose. I learned from Donald Miller in StoryBrand, which is one of my favorite and most highly recommended books, that confused people do not make decisions. And if someone is confused, they cannot decide whether or not they want to purchase your services. So I have often worked with photographers who have said, I think I'm pricing myself out, I'm getting ghosted, no one's responding, when one thing that they fixed and changed that made a big difference, that wasn't actually changing their pricing or lowering their prices to meet their clients where they were at, was to simplify their pricing and their offerings overall. Because I think a lot of times our pricing makes a lot of sense to us and our packages make a lot of sense to us, but they don't for the client and the customer. And that client and customer needs to very quickly understand how they can do business with you and what the next steps are and that kind of thing. So you need to run through a grunt test and figure out if your pricing is clear and concise, and if someone can understand it very quickly. So a great way to do this is to send your pricing to somebody who does not frequently work with photographers and may not even be in the market for a photographer. Have them look over your pricing document, whether this is a PDF or a brochure you send through Honeybook or a website page that's on your website that's unlisted. Whatever it is, have them look over it and then ask them if they can explain to you their pricing options. What are the options that are before them without explaining it to them? I think this is really important because this is going to be revealing to you if it's actually clear how they can work with you and which one stands out to them. So I think most oftentimes photographers fall into complicating their pricing through too many options and way too much wording and line items. So one way to simplify this is to make sure that if you're a wedding photographer, you have 2 to 3 collections max. And for portraits, you have 1 or 2 collections max. You can always do custom proposals if that's something that you offer, or have an a la carte menu. But I think by paring this down and making this far less visually confusing, you will actually be more likely to lead someone to a decision. So remember, if someone is confused, they cannot make a decision. And if they can't make a decision, they can't decide if they're going to book with you. And it may not actually be about the pricing. It may be that they're just confused about how you can help them and how you're the best choice for them. So if after this you're thinking, okay, I need to raise my pricing because the only way for me to be sustainably profitable is to raise my prices, then you need to watch this next video that's going to be on your screen right now. So this video is going to give you the 5 steps that you have to do in order to raise your prices, because we can't just arbitrarily raise our prices, right? We have to do things in order to set up our brand for success and actually bring the value to reflect that new price. So go ahead and hit the video on your screen right now, and I'll see you over there.